Here we go. Recording in progress.
How hard is it to have grown-up conversations with siblings sometimes?
Sometimes very hard. Like it's not easy at times.
No.
No.
So, everyone, I have a very special guest, well, special to me, in
Yeah.
the room today, zooming from South Africa,
All the way from sunny South Africa. Yeah.
my dear brother, John.
Hi, everybody.
It is so cool to be sitting in the flesh with you
Mm,
and to just nut out, yeah, how tricky siblings, are together sometimes dealing with hard family issues.
yeah.
And so I've been here for a month now, just over a month, and we've shared some really good conversations, but we've also had some tricky conversations.
Yes. Yeah. There's been a few difficult conversations, and uh, some of the conversations are easier face to face, and some conversations are harder face to face,
Yeah,
depending on the nature of the conversation. When you're on the phone miles away, or even in another room or another city, you don't have to concentrate too much on your facial body language. So if you disagree with what the person says, you sort of take the phone away and go.
is that what you did?
Sometimes you will do it, right? Where face to face, you've actually got to be more present,
Yeah,
and that sometimes makes it trickier because with siblings, it's hard to always be honest.
yeah.
Um,
So I've been in South Africa for a month now, and 3 out of the 4 of us are here,
mm,
and 3 out of the 4 of us have been in the room together,
yeah,
navigating some really tricky conversation. And uh, what's transpired is that you and I together in the evenings have had some really good conversations around how tricky this can be.
yeah,
So we thought great conversation to bring to the podcast today, because I think it's kind of a universal thing.
mm,
This siblings, just even agreeing to disagree sometimes,
yeah.
and recognizing that uh, we all grew up in the same family. However,
Yes, big however, right? It's that it's an amazing revelation, if you want to call it that, that we don't have the same parents.
yeah.
Um,
So we were listening to a podcast the other day. Mel Robbins was interviewing Gabor Mate, and he was sharing that siblings don't have the same parents.
mm.
And we were like, what? But we do.
Yeah, my
And
oldest
so,
brother used to tease that I didn't, but we absolutely do. But
oh,
yet
they are different. So you and
are different.
I'm number 2, you're number 4 in the mix, and we have recognized
And
that
there's a gap in
yeah,
years.
there's a big gap in years.
Yeah.
So I'm about 8 years older than you.
Well, you wouldn't say when you look at it, but yeah, somewhere around there, right?
And your experience of growing up in our family and my experience of growing up in our family are different, and that's okay.
Yeah. And so is the older brother.
Yeah,
He's just 2 or so years older than you, probably about 2 years older than you.
yeah,
Um,
almost, yeah,
he's also got a very different. The story he tells of growing up is different to the story that you tell of growing up. Is different to the story that our middle brother says growing up, which is different to the story of what I tell people about how I grew up. And the stories are different.
yeah.
Um, and yet the stories are true for ourselves, and yet a bit foreign to our siblings.
Yeah. And so now all of us come together and we're navigating the same family drama or crisis in real time together. And we come with these different
Yeah.
perceptions.
Different perceptions.
Different
Yes.
perceptions.
Yeah.
So as John and I have been talking about this over the last month, you've often shared with me your view on the difference between perception and perspective. And I'd love you
Yeah.
to to
Yes.
talk us through that, because
Yeah.
it's been also a revelation for me.
So the whole idea of perspective versus perception is it's sort of when there's a conflicting situation or a conflicting scenario, and we see the world through our own eyes, we see the world based on our own experiences, and particularly when it comes to things that are very close to the heart, like family,
Mm,
we almost get even more protective about how we feel and our thoughts around our parents.
Yeah.
You know, like as parents, we're not supposed to have favorite kids, but we do. You know, I'm lucky I've only got one kid, so he's my favorite and my least favorite at the same time. It's pretty cool. But also at certain stages through life, you've got a favorite parent, a parent that you might be closer to, a parent that you might relate better with, and it might change as you know as years go on.
Mm.
And as I go through different stages in my life, I find myself, you know, getting along more with one of the two parents, and it does change.
And even interesting as you share that, in my head, I'm going, huh? What? No. And it's my perception. And, I think the language I would have used around that in my mind is I might feel closer to one in a season
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
closer to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
another one in
Yeah,
a
maybe it's
season.
not a favorite thing, but it's you
Yeah.
definitely feel closer.
So again, just a
Yeah.
good example of different perceptions.
The different perceptions, yeah.
Yeah.
So we see the world through our own eyes, through our own
Yeah.
experiences, and where we are at a particular moment in our lives, and how our relationships with our siblings and parents are individually
Yeah.
at certain times in our lives. And we defend that.
Yeah. We do.
We defend it quite vigorously, and quite often we're defending it internally because the conversation is difficult to have with a sibling because you love them.
Yeah.
So you don't want to always call them out or say exactly how you're feeling inside. But then when you sort of leave those conversations, you don't understand why that person said what they said, and how is it possible we grew up in the same house when you're saying this and I'm saying that?
Yeah.
And it makes no sense.
And I think what makes these conversations so charged, you've hit the nail on the head there, is that they're your siblings. This is your family.
It's a family.
You know, and family, you can't kind of just decide you want a new family one day.
No, you know, you get to choose your friends, not your family.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's why we defend more when it comes to, family. Well, I don't know. It's my experience that, in our family, and maybe you're listening to this and maybe you're not really that close to your family and it doesn't make sense. But for now, let's just keep going with,
Once again, from my world and through my eyes, I haven't always been the closest to the family. If you look at the extended family, you've been a lot closer to the whole extended family.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm allowed to call out a brother, a sister, a nephew, a niece to say that they're, you know, being a bit painful, or they're a bit weird, or they're a bit, wacky. But no one else is allowed to say that. They're my family. Like I can say that about them, but no one else can chip in and say, "Yeah, your sister's a bit wacky." I mean, like, are you mad? You know. So we do defend it a lot,
Yes.
quite strongly, particularly with other people. And it might not be everyone in the family that you defend,
Yes.
but you know, you probably get to a point where there's something or someone or a situation that we do defend.
And I think again, we go through different seasons.
We go through different seasons,
Yeah.
and circling back to the first little point there, is we also have different parents.
Yeah.
We grew up in
Different times with different financial, circumstances, we went on different holidays.
Yeah,
We
right.
had different relationships. I'm the only girl with 3 brothers, so
Yeah.
that
I'm one of 3 brothers and a sister, and I've got a sister, right? So
yeah, so there's different perceptions. So talk us through, what's
yeah.
the difference between
So perceptions is how you perceive, it's how you see things. It's the mental video recording of the journey of your life.
I love that.
Call it that.
Yeah.
And it's how you've gone through a world, you've gone through a scenario, you've gone through a time in your life, and it's how you've seen it through your experiences.
It's your truth, right?
It's your truth.
Yeah.
And it's your perception of what's happening.
Yeah.
So you've got a perception growing up at home. For many years we lived under the same roof, and I have a different perception growing home. You're the only daughter with the 3 brothers, you're the second child. Mom and dad were sort of still developing in their careers.
Yeah.
So when I came along 8 years later, there's now 4 mouths to feed in the house, but mom and dad had done a little bit better.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit more to go around.
Yeah.
And there were more conversations to be had.
Yeah.
So, sitting around the dinner table, I could pretty much say nothing and get away with it, where you and the eldest couldn't, because mom and dad are so used to talking to you about how was your day, how was school.
We were that much older, and I think those conversations with older children, potentially there's more territory to navigate
Yeah,
than
absolutely.
with a little, toddler.
Yeah,
Or
I mean,
a junior school kid.
a child in high school or senior school, and you ask them about their day, and they go, fine. You know, there's a lot happening in that day.
Yes.
Where for a toddler, and you ask them, how was your day? And they, you know, explode into everything that happened, and they, you know, and yet it was like one thing.
Yes.
So the way the conversations are different, right?
Yeah.
So the perception that I had growing up with all of us in the house, and the perception that you had, comes from different lenses. It's a
Yes.
different view, all right? And, you know, if you're defending a certain part of the family and I'm defending a certain part of the family, we might not see eye to eye because we're coming from different angles,
Yeah.
and we're coming from with different perceptions. So then it's like that whole idea of, well, you know, how do we become sort of less sort of personal about it,
Less charged.
less charged up
Yes,
about it,
yeah.
and to
Less defensive.
far less defensive,
Yeah.
and to hear the other person and to kind of understand what's happening, is that you've got to like take that step back, and you've almost got to see all the perceptions coming into the table, and that gives you an overall perspective.
I love that. Yeah.
So perspective is what's everyone saying around the table, why they're saying it, accepting where it's coming from, accepting that you sometimes will agree and accepting that you sometimes will disagree, but it's their truth.
Yeah.
And that gives you a perspective. And then once you've got a perspective of the situation, it becomes easier to navigate, well, what should we do next?
I love that. And I think what happens is, you know, we've also spoken in the last week a lot about being curious, you know, being patient with each other and being more patient. And I think when you do take that step back and you give yourself a chance at least to have fresh perspective, I think that naturally leads to being a bit more patient with each other and asking questions like, oh my gosh, you know, what if I'm not, you know, right, completely right? And what if my truth is not the only truth? What is a different way of viewing this, which leads to that curiosity piece?
Yeah, you know, I've got to want to know. And we're talking about crisis situations.
Yeah.
We're talking about difficult conversations. We're not talking about what we're going to, you know, have for dinner tonight kind of thing. We're talking about those really tough discussions that we have to have.
We've had to navigate some tricky territory in the last month.
Yeah.
There've been a lot of decisions that needed to be made. And I've enjoyed spending more time. I feel like I've bonded more,
Yeah,
you know, in this month
absolutely.
with you and our eldest brother, and just watching the dynamic and the flow of the dynamic, and noticing in myself when I sort of clam up to defend, and the feels that go around that. And I mean, you've helped me so beautifully sometimes take a perspective back and go, hey, Kath, but you know, have you realized, for example, our older brother, excuse me, has two modes, you know,
Yeah.
there's work mode, and he's very effective in work mode at getting stuff done. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
But at times I felt like, gosh, you know, just chill. And yet there's another mode to him that is so beautifully chilled, and we have, you know, a lot of laughs and conversations.
No, we do.
And so that's helped me to not be so reactive when a text comes through and I think, oh, you know, and it's like, okay, yes, I understand now, because perspective. I'm seeing
It's like
a different perspective.
if you give yourself that time before you react, and kind of ask the question, where's this coming from? And to understand, you know, like people have got different modes. You got a work mode, you got a home mode.
Yeah.
And if you understand and just give yourself the time to go, okay, this is a work response or this is a home response.
No,
Your reaction to it is different.
A stress mode and a calm mode.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, like if I'm phoning you after hours, the conversation flows a lot better than when you're sitting in the situation that you're in.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's a bit more serious, it's a bit more, you know, we can't just sort of just have a natural flowing conversation. There's external factors that are kicking in. And I can't phone you and then go, oh, well, she was a bit off, and be all grumpy with you. I've got to understand that you're probably having a conversation that's very difficult at the time, or you're going through a situation that's sort of revving you up completely, and you're just barely hanging on to just stay calm. And I want to be able to go, that's okay.
And I've also, I mean, I've really appreciated that from you in this, because I think you've sometimes, in your curiosity, have asked me questions around, well, you said things like, gee, it's so interesting that whatever was said has fired you up so much, because it didn't fire you up.
Yeah.
And even noticing that different things press our buttons differently.
Mm.
And I love that you've kind of been so embracing and said, well, that's okay. You know, you've sort of pointed it out, but not in a judging way. It's sort of like, oh, this is curious. Like, tell me more. You know, it's okay, but I'm noticing that this is happening, and that's been so helpful.
I've learned a lot about, it was just the other day that I listened to that podcast that you shared about the fact that we got different parents.
Yeah.
And so that's triggered a curiosity to kind of find out a bit more. Because, you hear that sort of thing and you're going, nah, can't be, right? And then you listen to the podcast and, it's quite interesting and it brings up some really interesting things to consider and things to think about. And then you go, well, how does that apply to my own family? And one of the things that I have is this curiosity. So I like to I'm interested in why we got different parents, and I'm interested to how that affected us, and asking questions. Not only do you get information, which is pretty cool, but you start to learn about the other person's perspective, other person's perceptions.
Yeah.
And when you sort of get that, then I like now the last 6 weeks, I've learned a lot more about not necessarily the specifics of why you've triggered, but what's going to trigger you.
Yeah.
So, and it's, sometimes it's hit and miss, but I'm far more aware that in a certain scenario, something could trigger you.
Yeah.
And that then allows me to either try and like push the situation to avoid it, or just to go, well, look, we're going to have to go through this, but I might need to, offer a bit more comforting support after the fact, or once it's done, I need to give you a bit of space. And the same's happened with me.
Yes.
I've had times I've just said, look,
Yeah.
I disagree and I've left the table kind of thing.
And there was one time where I had a phone call. It was a tricky phone call with medical staff, and you were like, how were you so calm in that phone call?
Yeah, I would have exploded and got just lost all sense of rationality and sense of humor, and you were just like, yeah, okay, cool, we'll do it. So that's and it's from where we came from. So like in that phone call, you went into your coaching work mode.
Yes. Yes.
About not escalating, de-escalating, getting the information, don't upset the other person, all that kind of cool stuff. I would have just said no, seen red and exploded. Because we've got different perceptions on what we do and how we deal with with anger. But I was thinking about this last night, just about what's important for me about the idea around taking the time to step back, be patient with the scenario in front of you, be patient with how people are reacting, and be curious as to why, and kind of ask the questions at the right time. And it takes time. You don't do this in 30 seconds.
No.
We've got 6 weeks of all of us together, and even with the brother that's still back home, we've got to still chat to him, and it takes time to include everybody and to create a perspective. But it doesn't mean that you become the right person.
No.
At all.
No, it's not about right or wrong.
It's not about right or wrong.
No.
It's just allowing you to understand what's happening better.
And I think what helps us to navigate this also, again, big step back, and the perspective is, I think we've all wanted the same thing at the end of the day.
Look, we've been blessed by that.
Yes.
That the four of us with different families, growing up differently, living in different parts of the world, with our own families that are very different, even in dynamic.
Yes.
We don't all have one boy, one girl, and the boy's the older and the girl's the younger. We've all got complete different dynamics just in terms of that. And yet we'll all agree on the outcome.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we did, which I think was pretty cool as a family, was that we were able to put our hands up for certain of the responsibilities.
Yeah. And I think we were able to see each other's strengths. And then if you put your hand up and I go, yeah, absolutely, that's John's strength.
Yeah.
And we did that for everyone, which I think has been so helpful.
Yeah. And we stuck to that.
Yeah.
Whenever there's been a conflicting thing, and so for example, if it was like a medical thing, like the doctors and understanding how the medicines and I've learned words like polypharmacy and things like that I had no idea existed, kind of thing, and then when it comes down to the conversation with the GP, with the specialist, and they're giving us sort of information, as long as you're going, yeah, that makes sense, we're all going, okay, it makes sense. We're not then trying to hound the doctors because we don't understand and this is rubbish, and
you just hand me off.
We just, we'll chat to you because you can talk to us in what I like the term I use. You can talk to us in English, as opposed to in professional.
Okay.
you know, and that's great. And, when it came to things like, the various aspects of what we're going through, the oldest brother, he's got his thing, and
Yes, I
like,
mean,
and we
they're so
push it
good
to
with
him.
the planning and the next steps and the finances and there was so much organizational stuff that they took on. And I
Yeah,
was like, I'm so grateful they're
yeah,
doing that because that's not my
yeah.
strength.
But if there was ever
So
a conversation about something along those lines,
yeah,
he also, we will take the responsibility of the thing that's been nominated. So he just said, look, well, that's my role. I'll handle that.
yeah, yeah,
And then if we want to ask questions, there is this thing of we will share information.
yeah.
So I think naturally we did that pretty well as a family.
I think so. And I think also I was just recognizing that, in the moment, like the heat of of a tricky
Yeah.
thing, if I wanted to sort of take control, I was so I had one of the days we had quite a heated conversation, all of us. And I remember having this weird experience of like in my mind floating above and sort of looking at this and just
Getting perspective.
getting perspective. And I actually needed to check in with myself and say, Kath, let it go. Just let it go. This is not worth my little reaction or frothy fit in the middle of this because it's not going to help anything and it's actually not relevant.
Yeah.
And so just being able to at times let go when things got hairy. Yeah, grateful for the insight. And I think it's just grateful for having been in this coaching space for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely bring that side to it. What's also been interesting about that is that, siblings, it's so much from my in my view on life, my perception about it is that it's a lot more difficult than conversations amongst friends,
Yeah.
and it's a lot different to conversations amongst a family unit. Like we're talking about the sibling thing,
Yes. Yeah.
and siblings that have grown
Yeah.
up.
So my conversations with, excuse me, with Greg
Yeah,
every morning on FaceTime or whatever,
yeah,
he's still back in Australia,
yes,
have been very different to my conversations with you. So
absolutely.
spot on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and sibling conversations, particularly when it gets, we touched on that little thing about the youngest child syndrome, right? And that whole thing, and there's some truth to it, I suppose, but there's then also the oldest kid syndrome and the middle kid syndrome and the other middle kid syndrome and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. And we've got like the years between us. So like one of the things is that as the youngest, my go-to perception is that I'm not heard,
Yeah.
even though it's not true.
Yeah.
But that was for me. I had to once take a step back, get a different perspective on it. Going, yes, I'm not going to be heard on what the doctors are saying because that's my sister's area of expertise. And when it comes to planning and all that kind of stuff, that's my brother's plural, their expertise.
Yes.
They're better at it than I am and understanding the finances and the long-term projections and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I've probably got more of the, I was hit with all the techie stuff and trying to get phones and stuff organized and all that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so my perception is that I'm not heard because I'm the youngest, but in reality, from a perspective, is that yeah, those aren't my realm.
Yeah.
This is my realm.
Yeah.
So when it came to things like the moves and around the house and sort of more practical things and getting things, kind of doing a bit of the groundwork on certain things,
Oh,
that
and
was
connecting TVs and should we get fiber or should we get all that kind
all
of
that
stuff.
kind of stuff.
You were then
And I've come out of this going, yeah, like, I feel a lot more equal in the family than I did
that's great.
3 or 4 months ago, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not because anything's changed. It's just that I've got a new perspective.
Yeah.
It's the same family with different parents, but my perspective of all our perceptions is now a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I'm accepting a lot more. And I'm actually realizing that I've been accepted a lot more. So it's been awesome.
Yeah. So it has been, and I think just rounding up the conversation. So, take home points is, yeah, we all have different truths and different lenses and different perceptions of what's happening. And the gift of just being able to take a big step back, view a bigger perspective, be curious,
Hmm.
be patient with each other,
Be kind,
be kind. Yeah.
particularly in disagreement. It doesn't mean that you have to always agree.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say, listen, I don't agree with what's going on here. I don't agree with what's been said, but you can do it in a kind way of, sort of going, this is rubbish, or, you guys never listen, or no one cares, or we use that kind of language,
Yes.
that very kind of aggressive language. If it's more of, I don't understand, I don't agree, it doesn't feel like anyone's caring about this, but maybe I'm not understanding.
Yes. So tell me more.
So tell me more.
Yeah.
And
you've often said to me, can you say that in a different way? Like, like I'm still not understanding, say it a bit differently to help me.
Yeah.
And I've really appreciated that as well.
Well, in your mind, you got a framework. You framed the scenario for yourself, and then you say it, but it doesn't work for me. And I've learned to not just go, oh yeah, fine. This, family.
And walk away and go,
agreement.
that was weird.
And then you get nothing out of it.
Yes.
Where if I'm not understanding, I've learned to go, can you put it in a different way?
Yes.
And I'll even if I don't understand it again, I'll go, I don't understand. I don't get it.
Yes.
And it might mean that I need to be a bit more patient, or you need to be in a more patient state to talk to me in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's fine. We got to just give space, but not lose the curiosity of what did you mean by that? Because there could be some learning in there. So
patience and curiosity
creates good perspective.
So if you've been listening to this, I hope you have found a few nuggets to walk away with. And I'd also love to hear from you. You navigating family dynamics, what do you find useful? What have you found works? Because I think, more conversations like this are really helpful. Yeah,
absolutely.
But thanks, John.
Yeah, it's been
for
great.
joining me today. It has been awesome.
It's been awesome. Yeah.
And we managed to press that record button.
We did.
So, yeah, thanks.
There we go.